1, 2, 1, 2. All right, here we go. Up next on Inside the SCCA, Club Spec Evolution. Welcome to Inside the SCCA. I'm Brian Bielanski. It is episode, I don't know, I think it's 204 of Inside the SCCA. And 204 coming up on the end of 4 years doing this crazy thing. We have a really awesome episode coming up for the start of Season 5 with an absolute legend of motorsports. And he's got a new job. It all comes back. He started in the SCCA. And he's got a new job back with a thing that's kind of still related to the SCCA. You probably will figure it out if you've done this while enough. But I got a great guest today. We shouldn't get too far ahead of ourselves. Today I've got Blair Deffenbaugh, an absolute legend. I'm told by his friends in his own mind. But Blair, I don't do much research for these shows. A lot of times I like to kind of shoot from the hip. But when people told me that found out you were going to be on the show, they started doing research for me. I started getting messages, stories.
There's probably quite a few unsavory stories just waiting to be told.
Yeah. I don't know that I'll be able to share any of them because this is a family show. But
you know how when you do something real dumb and you look around and go, I hope nobody saw that?
Yeah, not anymore.
Everybody who contacted you saw it, and they're just waiting to tell you about it.
Yep. So welcome to the show. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. 204 episodes.
Yeah, 204. We're getting coming close to the end of season number 4. Wow. And season number 5 is going to start at episode 2009. That'll be 52 episodes times 4. So the first of the next one will be 2009. And I got a big one. I got some really good shows coming up in the next couple of weeks, but let's forget about that. This is going to be a really good show here. So we're going to talk about Club Spec. So what's really kind of cool, Blair, is almost a year to the date ago, I was in Akron, Ohio, doing something that I never, ever thought I would get to do. It's not even that I dreamed of doing it. It's like no one dreams of doing this. I got an invite from Goodyear, one of my sponsors. They help us go to the runoffs every year. Jay Chapman, a big supporter of the SCCA.
Yeah.
He calls me and says, "Hey, we're doing this Club Spec Mustang thing, and the Goodyear's the spec tire." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know that, Jay. Why? I mean, I already know that, Jay. What? So yeah, what?" And he goes, "Yeah, but we're building one." I'm like, "Oh, that's kind of cool. Building one." He goes, "Yeah, we call it the Yellow Submarine." And I probably should have pulled a video up. And I said, "Okay, that's cool. You're building a Mustang." And he goes, "Yeah. Well, we're going to run it for the first time at the Goodyear Proving Grounds in like 4 days." I'm like, "Oh, that sounds awesome. We should do a podcast about that."
Yeah.
And he goes, "Yeah, we should do a podcast about that, but you should come out here to Akron in December and drive this car." And I'm like, "What? Wait, what? Huh?"
At the Goodyear test track?
At the Goodyear Proving Grounds, at the test track. And I didn't, and I'm like, first of all, I'm like, "Whoa, let's go make this happen." And I'm like, I'm on my phone, like, okay, how do I get to Akron and all this kind of stuff? And wait, I should ask my wife if I can go away again because I've already been away for 87 days to go do super tours. And then I learned the history of the drivers who have been on this track and how few of them have been on it.
Yes.
And how I was fortunate enough to turn this friggin' little podcast 4 years ago from just this me and a kid who'd been to the runoffs was episode number 1, and he's now racing in Europe trying to go big time pro racing. He's been on the show multiple times. Jason Pribble. Didn't know that when I started 4 years ago.
Yeah.
He'd be trying to do this as his dream, and I've been able to follow along with him.
That's fantastic.
But I turned this thing into an opportunity to go and drive on a racetrack with some legendary drivers that have been on it, and the numbers of drivers are just terribly small, and my name is not on any list because they wouldn't put my name on the list, but I know, and I let everyone else know. Anyway.
Yeah, Goodyear, that test track has played host to some really big names and some fascinating cars as well.
Exactly. So it was a great time, learned a lot about the car, had a hoot, and I knew right then, from the first time I ran that car really slow because I didn't want to break anything. But from the first lap I took that this Club Spec idea had an opportunity to be really, really game-changing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, spec classes in road racing are huge. You know, one could argue that SCCA club racing even exists today because first there was Sports Renault and the numbers that came with that. That was my first car I ever raced. And see, this all comes full circle, Blair.
Oh, you raced a Sports Renault?
I raced a Sports Renault.
Wow.
And now I've raced the Club Spec. I've driven the Club Spec. I know. So, but I mean, at the time, SCCA didn't have the best numbers in the world. Sure. And Sports Renault was out there, and I think we had chassis number 425, or could have been 225. But anyway, now they're up to chassis number 800 something, is the last thing I heard. And then, of course, Spec Miata. That's we know the success of that and how much that has done for club racing, and now we've added even more spec classes. You know, with oh my gosh, what is the Formula car spec? Oh my God,
there's don't want Formula F.
No. The SCCA spec class. With the wings, I can't believe I've completely lost my mind. How FE2, Formula Enterprises, FE2.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, I mean, like how does that loop? Anyway? But there's the spec classes have become so important to the club. They're 100%. Fun to drive. They level the competition in most cases. And when I got a chance to drive the spec Mustang, and assuming that the spec MX-5 car was going to be, the Club Spec MX-5 car was going to be along the same lines, I'm like, wow, this is huge. You know, it's not necessarily cheap. We've talked about that in the past, but it's a level platform. And
level platform, not hard to find.
Not hard to find. You know, when you drive, when you suck in one of these cars, it's because you suck and not the car typically. So we're now a year on, Blair.
Yeah,
we're going to talk about that in a minute. But first, I have to ask you the question. You're a first-time guest.
Let's get into it. I don't know what the question is.
That's fantastic. It's fantastic because you don't know, but it's like that means he's never watched the podcast, and now I get to ridicule you for that too. So that means I got some more pushing. No, I'm just kidding.
What's funny about that is I have listened to the podcast, but apparently it's the only one that doesn't have the question in it.
Well, if you've been on more than once, you don't get the question a second time. So what you listen to is one of the handful of podcasts with a second-time guest. Mm-hmm. So here's the question. It's really simple. How did you get mixed up in this crazy sport that we love?
Oh boy. Wow. How much time are we going to be on here?
I've got till tomorrow. I don't have to be at work till 7 a.m. Okay. So
I'll keep it tight for that. My dad had been racing since the mid 80s. Mm-hmm. I quite literally grew up at Rockingham Motor Speedway.
Nice.
Rockingham, or it was Roebling Road. That's where we went whenever we had the chance to. And so I grew up at the racetrack. I basically never had a chance, Brian, to get out and survive. It's where I've been, and it's where I've only ever wanted to be.
Yep.
So
yep. My pop's to blame too. That Sports Renault I drove was Dad's car. So.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I like that.
Yep. What did your dad drive?
Well, depending on the day of the week, we've had a couple different cars. The best story probably is he got his license at Road Atlanta in an IT. Well, it was an ITA car at the time, a first generation RX-7.
Okay.
Lost track of that car through the decades. It kind of went away. It ended up in somebody else's hands they were mid-rebuild on it.
Right.
And never finished the rebuild, which is a super unique story. Everybody always finishes the build, right?
Right.
They were aiming the car at IT7, which is a class here in the Southeast. And he picked it up from them, finished the build, got it running again. And then my brother and I both also got our licenses in the same car. So, of course, 30, I can't do math. I went into marketing because I can't do math,
Sure.
but something like 35 years apart from each other, we got our licenses in the same car. But the first car that he built was an ITS 240Z.
Okay.
That bought out of a junkyard, actually.
Yeah. So, and what years was he doing down in the Southeast? Give or take.
He built that Z in '88.
Okay.
And it basically never stopped all the way to 2020.
All right. So I probably shared a racetrack with him down at Road Atlanta when I was running an ITC car.
Oh, almost certainly.
Yeah, very likely.
Almost certainly.
Very likely. So, and he was probably driving right past me because I was really slow. So when was when was your first time racing?
My first time, I didn't know this was that kind of show. My first time was oh boy. I guess I don't know what year. Actually, I do know what year it was. Something around 2012.
Okay.
Thereabout. I went to, if Mike Kelly's watching, he's going to hate this. I went to Summit Point to get my license in RX-7. And the deal with my dad was you can use the car, you can do what you need to with it, but you're paying for it.
Sure.
So I blew everything on that school and had to wait a year or so before I got back in the car again. And, by 2014, I would say I had my license.
Cool. Yeah, my deal with Dad was if you graduate from high school, I'm like, Dad, if I'm not the greatest student, but there's no question. There's no question I'm not going to graduate.
Right.
But no, the deal was if I graduate from high school, I get 2 schools, and then from there I'm on my own.
Oh, that's great. I love that.
So I did 2 schools, and that was it. And then once I got to Atlanta and I got to CNN and I was making a little bit of money, I went out and bought a Honda Civic and built it into an ITC car. So
great.
So similar thought process. Dad will only do so much for us.
You got to figure it out one way or the other. That's
Exactly.
kind of the way it goes in racing.
Exactly. So what's your progression been since then? I mean, you've got this RX-7. You go through your 2 schools. You put every ounce of cash that you've got into it.
Whatever I had at whatever age I was.
Exactly.
2 now, 33 now, something like that.
Yeah.
However long.
Yeah.
We drove the IT7 car for a while. The Z being a race car from the late 80s had been punched a time or two.
Sure.
And it needed its 3rd quarter panel, and at the same time melted a piston, so it also needed a motor. And so that car went down for a little while. And my brother, my dad, and I all split the IT7 car for a bit, and then eventually started kind of slowly getting the Z back on track, and then we drove that for a little while. My dad owned a shop in Cary, North Carolina, working on Japanese cars.
Mm-hmm.
And so between the racing and that, we just sort of wayward cars would show up.
Right.
And never go away. And one of those cars was actually an ITC Nissan Pulsar. So drove that for a little while.
That's a real popular car.
Yes. There were a lot of them. It was a really well figured out platform. It's a good ITC car. This car would, at VIR going up the uphill S's, you really had to think hard before you put it in 5th, because if you put it in 5th, you're gonna slow down. So if you can keep it in 4th up the uphill, you're gonna be in better shape.
Yeah.
But so we drove that car for a little while, and then my brother and I bought an ITS Integra GSR.
Right.
Drove that for a while until I got the B-Spec car. I got, I guess this is year 3 or so for the B-Spec car. I wanted to program, I wanted to go, as an SCCA kid, the runoffs was my favorite thing to watch.
Sure.
I watched it however I could, as often as I could. And I wanted to go to national racing. And so B-Spec was the class for me on that.
Yeah. Ed Murray is in the chat. John K.
Okay, great.
I know who John K is. Bryce McGuire says, shout out Rex Deffenbaugh.
Mm-hmm. That was my dad. Yeah. Thanks, Bryce.
There you go.
I've been on the track with a couple of those fellows.
If anybody has questions for us about the famed career of Blair, or once we get to the real topic of conversation, Club Spec.
I don't know if you want to blow it that wide open, but
anyway, put your questions in the chat. We'll get to some of them throughout the evening. So
sure.
And you've been to Solo Nationals a couple times.
Yep.
This is how we're going to get to our topic of conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, I went to Solo Nats a couple times. I did a lot of autocrossing because it was the only thing I could really afford to do when I first got moving. Of course, I found out it's the best possible driver training out there.
No question.
And so I really enjoyed it. That was something I could just kind of do myself. I had an 87 base model Honda Prelude that I had to rebuild the carbs on it, and then eventually I had to put a head gasket on it too. And I just hammered the crap out of that car. But it taught me a ton, and I autocrossed it like crazy. And so I did a ton of autocross in the earlier years. And then for me, it's like every sort of step up I go, the previous step kind of becomes a little dated. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to keep doing this. And so, and I don't necessarily mean step up, but by the time I got to wheel, it was like, you know what? Everything is going to be about wheel to wheel. Every dollar I can spare, I just have to go racing. Yeah. And so I kind of fell out of autocrossing for a little while until I got to SCCA staff, and they let me go compete at my first Solo Nationals a few years ago, which was an absolute blast. It was so much fun. Yeah. And this year, being back on staff again, second time's a charm, I hear.
Right.
We JK and I actually shared the SCCA CSX car.
Yep.
At Solo Nationals, and it was a real blast. It was a ton of fun.
Andrew Benos says I should refer to you as the CSX Nats trophy winner, Blair Deffenbaugh.
Yeah.
So
I'm glad it's starting early. This is great.
Absolutely. This is going to be fun. Now the people are rolling in here. All y'all who are putting stuff in the chat here, you need to make sure you like and subscribe. And I appreciate that if you'll do that.
I also relish that I can say what I want to about them, and I don't have to hear what they say back.
That's true. Well, I may share with you what they say back, so just remember that. So this year you got to drive the CSX car, and no joke, you took it to a 4th place finish, which is pretty awesome.
Cannot believe it.
And as I found out, my first time to Solo Nats was 2 years ago. I thought you had to be good to go to Solo Nats. So clearly, I'm proof that you don't. But I had such a good time, and I went there because I wanted to do the show from there. That was my real reason. And you know, I was trolled. I was told by Hayward. He said, "Well, if you're going to go, you have to compete or drive." No, he said you have to drive. He didn't say anything about competing. He said you have to drive.
Competing. He did say drive. Though.
Exactly. He didn't use the word compete. And he goes, "You've got to drive." And I'm like, "I don't have anything to drive." He goes, "Just drive whatever you got." And so I took I call it this my Papa Smurf car, the blue Honda Fit, and had a blast.
Great. Yeah. Hey, look, the Fit. What a beautiful race car.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
I may be the only person who's finished last 2 years in a row at Solo Nationals. So, but had a blast doing it. So.
Yeah, it's a good time.
So we're now a year into Club Spec. There's 2 versions. As I like to say, there's 2 versions. There's the Club Spec Mustang, and there's the Club Spec MX-5, which has the designation CSX. We don't have to go too deep into the nuts and bolts of the 2 cars, but they're have the same package that you could buy to put on both cars to make them Club Spec cars. It's a suspension package. The motor is the stock motor that came on the platform, depending on whether you choose the Mustang or the Miata. The internals on the transmission are all the same, whether you get it's all stock there. So really, it's kind of almost like I look at it as almost like an improved touring version of a solo car. You change the tires, you change the suspension. It's only what you can do. The difference is that you have to use the package either the Mustang package or the Miata package or the MX-5 package.
Right.
And when you do that, if everyone's on the same stuff, that it's a spec car. So that was the concept. The concept was to build the car so that it could go into multi-disciplines. Right now, it's being mostly used in autocross and time trials.
Mm-hmm.
I think there might be some ideas of putting it into something else down the road, but some of those are harder rule sets to work out.
Of course, yeah.
But
for sure.
But I think the easy ones
We're good with our rules here.
Yeah, the easy ones are the time trials and autocross.
Yeah.
We've learned a year's worth of stuff now. We've done several shows on Club Spec. What have we learned over the first year?
Over the first year, we have a little bit changed the way we're kind of thinking about what this is.
Okay.
Through conversations we're having, people we're talking to, stuff we're kind of seeing, Club Spec is actually calling back previous super hardcore competitors.
Really?
We kind of saw Club Spec initially, and it still is. By all means, it certainly still is. But we kind of originally saw it as a first step,
a gateway drug,
a gateway drug. Yeah, absolutely. We all know about that. A first step into it. But we're kind of seeing, Brian, people got really hardcore into it, and you know as well as that you can dump so much time into the car, whether it's an autocross car or a road race car, whatever it is, you can dump a tremendous amount of cubic hours into a car. Depending on what class you're in, the fiddling, I call it the fiddling can get higher and higher. You're just always having to mess with the car constantly.
Right.
And that burns people out. And what we're seeing is Club Spec, the simplicity of it and the spec aspect of it is calling some of these people back. There are a few hardcore competitors that left the autocross world just because they were like, I've been doing this for a while. I'm kind of out of it. I'm going to go do some other things with my life for a little while. And they looked at Club Spec and went, well, dang, I keep brakes on it, keep gas in it, make sure the tires aren't worn out, and I'm racing.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Let's go do that. And so it's one thing that we've learned is it's kind of calling hardcore competitors back into it with a sort of, you can daily drive this car. You can also take it anywhere and be competitive amongst your peers, amongst similar cars.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Is Patricia mom?
Yes.
Mama yes. Deffenbaugh is saying, y'all be nice to my boy.
Yes, she says that a lot. She does that.
You said cubic time, cubic hours?
Cubic hours, yeah.
You can also put cubic dollars into some of these cars.
Cubic dollars, big time.
And this, in theory, limits that. You know, I mean, once you put the package on, it's cubic tires. You know, you can change tires as often as you want. I don't know how much of an advantage that is to do that very often. Obviously, tires do wear out.
Tires wear out, but the tire formula and the 200 tread wear tire, it just doesn't act like a street tire of yesterday, and it also doesn't act like an R-Comp, which is kind of the point.
Right. It's just a hoot to drive. You know,
fun.
At Nationals, there was a come drive the Club Spec on the test track day.
Club Spec demo day.
Was that both the Mustangs and the Miatas? Was there?
Yes.
Okay. So I never got to drive the Miata. I should have walked over and took a ride in that.
You should have come over and checked it out.
But I did get a chance, like I said earlier, to talk about the Mustang, and it was just a blast. Mm-hmm. Is the fun factor in the Miata pretty much the same?
It's the same. It's the same. It is so much fun to drive. On the one hand, it's a Miata. It's just go drive it. It's a Miata. It's going to take care of you. It's going to be all right. It's a different kind of fun. I like one of my favorite cars I've ever autocrossed was my NA Miata. I had a 1.8 NA Miata for a little bit. When I got it, it was bone stock. It had 180,000 miles suspension on it that was totally worn out. And I felt like I was going to scrape the door handles off every single element I put it into. And that car was so much fun to drive in that. Actually, I went to a local autocross and I got red flagged. When I would unload the left front of the car, there was a vibration in the wheel.
Uh-huh.
Kind of felt it out. I grew up driving absolute garbage on the street, and so you kind of know
Yeah.
what things feel like and working on cars and stuff. I kind of know how things are going. I decided not to worry too much about it. On my second run, they red flagged because they thought the wheel was going to depart the car. And it turned out the left front shock was so wasted that it was just the wheel was bouncing uncontrollably,
that's
which
awesome.
was the vibration I felt.
There you go.
But the point is, I enjoy playing with the weight transfer. I really like that. And so the Mustang, it does kind of move a little bit. It's a dynamic car to drive because it's leaning some. It'll kind of stand on its nose a little bit. It'll kind of transfer weight to the rear. Like it'll move around. And I found that super fun to play with.
Yeah, I found the Mustang, I could get it to step out, and I could get it to come back just as easily. It was really easy to find the limit, to cross the limit, but not to get yourself stupid messed up.
Yes.
And it was so there's some fun factor in that. If you can get the car to get loose with a little throttle appliation and still be able to control it, that's just, especially after only a couple of laps in it. It's one of those things where in other cars I've driven, it took me a while to figure out where that limit was, and then I realized very quickly why, because I didn't want to go past it. This made me want to go past the limit on occasion.
Yes.
Because I knew I wasn't going to hurt myself or the car.
Correct. Correct.
And that's great for newbies because that's important to not hurt your car.
Of course.
Especially because we want you to come back and do it again and again and again.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
On the opposite end of the spectrum, you asked about the Miata. On the opposite end of the spectrum, the NC, it's the exact same way in the way that it's super composed and reliable, and you're not concerned. You want to get that to that edge because the car feels good there, but it's not really moving around a whole lot. There's not a ton of body roll in it. It's a lot more it is still a street car primarily, so it does move some, but it's a lot more knife edge than the Miata or than the Mustang is. And so I find those two to be polar opposites in the best possible way. Both cars are so fun to drive for their own reasons. The Mustang has some reasonably good power. The go pedal makes you go. It makes pretty fun noises as well.
Yeah.
And you can play with the car's pretty dynamic. You can move it around some. The Miata, knife edge, a little bit more weapon like. But what I enjoyed about both cars is, to your point, good for being noobs. The performance window, massive. It's huge for both cars. The Miata is slightly smaller than the Mustang, but the performance window is huge for both cars. You can get in it, go drive it, and feel good about it.
Yeah. You'd mentioned earlier that the initial intention was entry level to get people in, but you'd mentioned that some people were coming back. Case in point, Dan Lohan is in the chat, says that Club Spec brought him back to the SCCA. So that's a great problem to have.
I love it. I talked to Dan quite a bit. I'm glad to have him in the class.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, it was interesting because I've never seen the club lay out a new class like this, where there was two different cars launching it, going into the program. And what I found to be interesting was, rather than just saying, here is our rule set for the first year, we're not touching a thing, there were some modifications, minor, for things that people learned about because they were just driving a car for the first time. So some really thoughtful additions to the rule set came throughout the year. And I think that helped a lot because people were just learning what both these cars needed, either to make them be a little safer or to be a little more reliable or whatever the case may be. And I think that worked out pretty well for this new class.
I think you're totally right. Boy, howdy, I got a lot of thoughts on a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
One of them that kind of rise to the top for me is the community has been incredible with Club Spec, we have it's a super active Facebook page. Every other day, I am tempted by someone posting a donor car, or quote unquote donor car. Hey, it's not my car, but check out this Mustang. It's pretty
Yeah.
cheap. Somebody should look at it. Or hey, I just found this Miata in my town. I can go look at it if somebody needs me to. Like that sort of camaraderie has been huge. And what that allows us to do is to make those changes on the fly. It can be tough to make changes to longer standing classes.
Right.
There's a lot of investment in them, and it gets tough to make any kind of change because someone there's all ends of the spectrum, and somebody's going to be slighted by almost any change you make. And
Right.
the community has been incredible by giving us the space to I don't want to be too flippant about it, but mess around. To study things and look at it and go, actually, you know what? I think we messed that up, so we're going to change that right now. Or, hey, we just learned about this, so we're going to just push this through and make it happen right this second. The Mustang has a great example. The Mustang has a ton of different trim levels,
right,
that make it kind of hard. You don't really want to exclude any because you just want it to be as open as you can. But then there's the I'm going to mess this up because I don't have the knowledge on the Mustangs, but there's the Bullet is a
right.
largely trim package, but I'm pretty sure it made 20, 30 more horsepower than its counterparts.
Right.
There's a ton of trim levels like that with hoods, spoilers, air dams, intakes. There's all sorts of stuff like that. And the community has given us the space to figure that out, make those changes and go, oh, actually, if you're doing this, you got to change this over or whatever the case may be,
Well, and there's a lot of these donor cars that when you get them, they've futzed around with them and might have added, a hood or a different spoiler in the back, and
grills.
Yeah, or whatever, exactly. And if you don't have a little bit of latitude, you basically are limiting potential donor cars, or adding on a ton of cost to bring the car back to stock. And
Yes.
and if you've got to spend $1,000 to go back to stock, that's a set of tires.
Totally.
That's entry to five entry and travel to 5 events.
Yeah.
Where are we trying to go with things? And you talked about the community. We should also shout out to Sam Strano and to Mazda Motorsports for working with everyone to get the base package started and to be part of that process. Without both of those, without Sam and without Mazda working at the front end of all of this, we wouldn't even have the Club Spec cars, would we?
For sure. No, having technical partners like that on the backside to help you figure that stuff out is huge. And Sam has a ton of knowledge on the Mustangs. He's been running that platform for a long time.
Yeah.
So having those tech partners on the backside to help you not only with parts, but kind of going, hey, actually, you really shouldn't be doing this way. You shouldn't write this like this because of these reasons. You should change that. It has been a big help for sure.
Right. So now that you've had the year to kind of do those little changes on this fly to get the cars where you want them, are we at a point now where it's time to lock down the rule book for a year or 2 or 5? Where are we at?
I don't think so,
okay.
Honestly. I was hired in February, so a lot of these conversations I have not been a part of.
Sure.
To me, honestly, it kind of feels like we're just getting started. There's lots of discussions happening on the backside around, oil coolers is a thing that come up. Some of the Mustang trim levels have amplifiers in them, and the rules are not super square right now. It's being worked on and talked about as we speak. Are not super square on what can be removed and what should be left as far as radio components and stuff. And so there's a lot of little details like that are going to help make understanding the class easier that we are working through right now. So from my perspective, it kind of feels like we're actually just getting started. But none of these changes are big sweeping changes. We're not adding intakes. We're not adding, we're not doing huge things. It's more about clarifying what can and should be done. And the important part, and I think something you said earlier, we're keeping fresh eyes on it and looking at it from the standpoint of someone who does not know about cars. That's kind of, I actually meant to say this earlier, now that I'm thinking about it. ADHD mind just goes nuts.
Sure.
One thing that we have talked a lot about is it's hard to know what parts you should be swapping for a car that you're going to put on track or a car that you're going to go autocross. What do I buy? What brand should I look at? What pieces are most important? Should I get wheels and tires? Is that the most important, or should I go and find an oil cooler because this car has high oil temps? Like whatever the situation is, it can be hard to look at that. And we find through a number of conversations that people struggle with new people struggle with a huge parts list. And so one way to look at Club Spec is this is a build recipe. We're giving you the parts list. Here are the parts you should be buying for this car. And at the end of it, you're going to have a daily drivable car that is perfectly survivable in the street. It is also super fun to drive. That was a key, is be fun to drive. And not be hard. You're not hunting down super specific spacers for whatever. It's just buy the part, put it in the car, drive it, finish. No thinking about it. That was a big deal for us. And we're going to continue to think like that to just make it easier to get in. That's the goal. Make it easier to get in.
Yeah. That's a good time for me to take just a break and thank the people who helped me do this. Don't go anywhere because I've got a bunch of questions queued up in the chat that we want to get to, so stand by for that. Real quick, a ton of people helped me do this and helped me go to the solo nats and go to the runoffs, and thank you to them. Of course, it's Inside the SCCA presented by RaceSchool.com. They are the official race school of Inside the SCCA. They are an SCCA licensing school, so you can go do your 3-day or whatever it is. I think it's a 3-day school, and if you pass, that's key. It's not you don't automatically get it. You actually have to pass. You walk away with an SCCA license, and you can go racing at your local SCCA events. Great people there, great system that they use. RaceSchool.com. Check them out. Solo Performance Specialties. We're talking about Club Spec. Autocross is one of the places where it goes often. If you're at the track and you need stuff for your car, you know, that all those like safety stuff, and that's the type of stuff you can get for a Club Spec car. And they got a bunch of stuff for all other cars as well. Solar Performance Specialties, back with us again for another year. So happy to have them with us. Ray Esports is the official sim racing league of Inside the SCCA, and happy to have Ray Esports on board. Stevie Ray and his band of merry people who do it. Love having them part of what we do. And then, of course, Racekeeper is the official in-car camera of Inside the SCCA. And if you want to have some great in-car footage with overlays and all this kind of stuff, really fun platform, that would be the Racekeeper platform. So, all right, we're back at it here talking about Club Spec. Blair Deffenbaugh is our guest tonight. Blair has quite the fan club out there. We've got some Blair-related questions that we'll get to at the end. We'll keep the focus here on the Club Spec questions at the moment. But Sam Doherty says that he's like, so he shouldn't expect the Club Spec Toyota Sienna that he's hoping to get a spec line for. That's not going to come out this year, right?
It's not going to come out this year, but I've been thinking a lot about Sam. We're going to be coming to him for a parts package development deal for sure.
Okay. I love it. But that's a good question, though. Sienna aside.
Well, maybe. We'll see.
We've got the Mustang. We've got the MX-5. There's other cars we could do this with. I know when the first questions went out, there was a Boxster option that was being discussed. There were a couple of others. Are we done? Is Spec MX, is CSX and CSM? Is that it?
You are going to give me a chance to put my foot in my mouth, huh? You're really going to let me do this.
You don't have to say anything, but by saying what you've said, you already have opened the door.
So there's nothing official. There are no real the conversations right now. Obviously, bandwidth is a problem for almost every human being these days, and that certainly goes for SCCA with a number of programs that we're running. A lot of time is being poured into making sure CSM and CSX are both, I'm going to use the phrase, high and tight,
right,
and approachable. We don't want to move on too quickly and kind of leave a mess behind us. So we're trying to make sure that these things are really very polished. That being said, the discussions around a P-car class have never really officially stopped. Can't really put anything on the board for sure, but there is on the other side of that, keeping with the pairs rule, there is a thought of trying to put together a package that could come together for 10 grand or less, including donor car.
Right.
Again, Club Spec is all about approachability, and so having that sort of 10 grand or less price tag is a big deal for us. But so nothing official, but boy, it sure would be great to have I don't know, a 981 Cayman class, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that could be fun.
That'd be fun.
Couple questions. The idea for this was to go on multiple disciplines. At first, we heard a lot about going rallycross. I don't know. I think that was a great idea until you think about this shock package on either car going off road. And maybe that's just not a good idea. But the idea of finding a home in club racing for these cars, that's not too far-fetched. I mean, the Mazda package is a lot of what's already in the Spec MX-5 cars.
Correct.
Is that are those discussions quietly happening, not happening at all? What's the future on the club racing side?
Those discussions got real loud this week. So loud that we're going to do it right here, right now. Club Spec is going to be in race experience in 2025. So you will be able to take your Club Spec Mustang, your Club Spec Miata, and you're going to have to, obviously, I believe it's level 3 time trial safety. So put a cage in the car and some small stuff like some other small things. The cage is not small, but put a cage in the car and you'll be able to go to race experience and also keep autocrossing that same car. You're going to be able to keep time trialing hill climb that exact same car. So it becomes a true one card solution to almost everything that SCCA has to offer. And I'm going to add one to it since you mentioned it. I'm glad no one is on my phone right now watching this because I'm not really sure if I'm supposed to do this or not. But the Rallycross board is putting together an alternative suspension package, an alternative shock and spring package for both cars so that you can rallycross both cars.
Wow.
We will be able to do the full spectrum of SCCA events with the one car.
Very, very cool. That's pretty awesome.
It'll be really fun, I think.
Help me out here because not everybody is as immersed in the club as I am. And I know what the SCCA race experience is, but a lot of people might not. Can you give us the Reader's Digest condensed version of what the race experience is?
I struggle with condense anything ever at all, so maybe you'll have to stop me. But especially when it comes to road racing, my favorite thing on the planet. Race experience is SCCA's entry for a low barrier to entry club racing program. No license required. We're not worrying about classes. We don't want to think about car classes. If you bring us a safe caged car, we'll figure out how to get you on track with somebody else. And that is the key. We had 6 events this year, I think, in its first year, and we're shooting to have 15 to 20 events or so next year.
Wow.
I went to one. A buddy of mine used my car at Carolina Motorsports Park a couple weekends ago to do the race experience. And aside from placing well at Super Tours, that race experience was the most fun I have ever had on track or in a race car. It was such a blast. I drove as an instructor car, and so my buddy used my car all weekend to run the event, and I used everyone else's car to be an on-track instructor. And the situations that we were able to create for these new drivers, it was so much fun. And being able to be out there with my friends, I'm out there looking at my car. It is a bizarre experience to bump draft your own car in someone else's car that you also don't own. It was so much fun. It's such a good program, and a lot of it stems from the minds of John Krolitz, actually, and Hayward Wagner, that sort of track night approach. It's all the stuff I love about track night brought to club racing.
Nice.
we had debriefs after every session. We gathered all the drivers up and talked to them. We chatted for a while. It's such a good program. It's the only other thing that I'm most excited about for SCCA next year, for sure.
John Krolowitz says, I know a guy who could come on and talk about that for a whole podcast, and he knows what question he's going to get asked because he has listened before. John, I wonder who you're talking about.
Who could he possibly be referring to?
And by the way, yes, and I'll be sending you an email. Funny, we're going to get to some other questions that are more Blair-centric. Most of the trolls in the chat have the last name Deffenbaugh, which is really awesome.
It's a shocker. I never seen that coming.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so a great question, though. Morales UFL, and I don't know who this is, but this is an awesome question. One of the ideas of this class is that it's still streetable.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, how many street miles can you put on the Penske's before you start thinking you've got to go either replace them, revalve them, rebuild them, however they're going to be used? What's realistic? That's a great question.
That is a great question.
Because I'll be honest with you, the one thing I hear people complain about the most, which is very little do we hear complain about, is the cost of those dang Penske's.
Yeah. I mean, cost is a huge thing. I'm a B-Spec racer. All I do is count dollars to make sure I'm going to make it. I definitely understand that. I think, I hope Dan, actually, Lowen is still watching. He has put a ton of, probably more than anybody else, miles, whether it was track, autocross, or street miles on his Penske's. I think we were talking, I can't remember the number. He has put, I want to say like 17 events and a bunch of street miles on his Penske's and has not touched them in a full season.
Right.
Which obviously is a streetable car. We want more than one season out of the shocks. That would be great. That is a really good question. My bet is a lot because at the end of the day, this is still a street car.
So Dan was still with us. His answer is he's done 35 track days. So let's talk that. That's probably going to get you maybe 300 miles a track day.
Yeah.
You know, let's go with that. 10 autocrosses and probably 3,000 street miles. And I'm assuming he still likes how the shocks feel, or else he wouldn't be putting that in there.
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, so great. I mean, that's a good question. Over time, we'll get more data on that.
Right.
And it'll become somewhat obvious what the situation is there. Let me see if there's any other.
Sorry, Brian.
Go ahead.
Quick, I just want to point out, Dan, we talked about the Club Spec Demo Day at Solo Nationals. Dan actually let us use his car. Several Club Spec drivers let us use their cars. All the cars that we use were, with the exclusion of the one club car, all the cars were borrowed.
Yeah.
We basically and said, hey, if we can figure out a tire solution for you, if we can get you a tire or two, will you let us use your car? And I think 12, 15 cars showed up. There were 4 or 5 Miatas and a handful of Mustangs. It was great. And so Dan's car got a ton of demo rides on it as well, on those same Penske's.
Cool. That's awesome. Yeah. Have we missed anything in this discussion before we move on to some other stuff? To the questions for you?
Whatever I can do to avoid those questions, probably. What else can we talk about?
I don't know. I
don't think we have. I think to wrap up that portion of it, I've been a member my entire life. I've got a 30-year membership pin. I'm right on your heels with that 35 years. However old I am is the number of years I've been a member. And I don't know that I've ever been more excited about something than I am about Club Spec and the combination of Club Spec and Race Experience. I think Race Experience is the best foot forward for a club racing situation that SCCA has probably ever done, for me anyway. And both of those two programs are going to be high on the watch list for anybody who's interested in getting into motorsports at any level.
Yeah, very cool. I saw one note here that I wanted to mention. From Samuel Doherty. Rob Wilmus' review of the whole Race Experience really shined a good light on the program. So, do you know where that review is that we can send people to listen to it or watch it?
Yeah, I do. It was that was actually in Grassroots
Okay.
Motorsports, but that's also on our website. If you go to scca.com and click the news tab up there, it'll be there, and we can drop a link in somewhere, I'm sure.
Cool.
Experience
We'll
there.
put that link in the show notes for
Yeah.
you as well. Carlos Morales, how concerned are we regarding bushing life for suspensions on the older cars? Are people refreshing them with OE parts?
They are. Some of them are. I think Dan did a pretty extensive refresh on his car. It kind of comes down to mileage and how much you want to do. How deep do you want to dive right now?
Yeah.
There's almost no doubt that you will have to eventually replace some of these bushings. If you got a low mileage car, I just wouldn't worry about it too much right now. Get the other stuff put together, and then the Club Spec package is right for. I'm going to do the big stuff this year, and then next year we'll do the other things, because the gains, I think, are going to be relatively small for little bits like that.
Yeah.
It is an older car, so no doubt it will come up.
Sure.
But I've driven several of them, and none of them have I gone, wow, this car is clapped.
Yeah.
It all felt pretty good.
So Carlos says that the Mazda doesn't sell OE bushings, so you have to buy the entire suspension arms, which can become pricey. I'll have to trust him on that because I don't know. But yeah, that could be expensive. But again, if it's a low mileage car, if it's a high mileage car and you need bushings, you probably need bushings anyway. So, that's something that you'll have to kind of dig into for yourself. Yeah, it just seems like a lot of things are lining up really nicely for this Club Spec idea.
I think so. It's been really fun to watch so far, and I hope that it. To be honest with you, we're kind of blown away at the number of cars that were built in the first year.
What are those numbers?
Ballpark. I knew I shouldn't. Ballpark. There's 40 to 50 cars that have been built, and then probably close to that again, maybe not quite, that have been bought.
Right.
For next year. But it was like, I forget how many cars we had. I think we had 14 of each at Solo Nationals.
Right.
At the end of the class's first year, we had that number of cars that not only were purchased and put together, but felt good enough to come to a national level event like that. It is fantastic.
Yeah. All right. And do the numbers roughly work out to 50-50-ish? Is it a pretty even split?
It's more like 60-40.
Towards the Mustang?
For the Mustang, yeah. Which is also, that's a thing that we've learned. You asked earlier, a thing that we learned.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I kind of see why. I mean, there are a bunch of us who we love the involvement of Mazda in the club. We get so much out of that relationship, and we just did a whole thing on Spec Miata. But sometimes we see another Mazda class and we roll our eyes and go, oh, gosh, another Mazda class. But that's why I'm not surprised that it might be slightly more on the Mustang, you know, and considering everybody kind of loves American muscle, that's also, I think, plays a little bit into it. So that's good. This is kind of related. Greg 5G Ginsburg asks, now that time trial Nats are moving to pit race, do you know where the pit in is at pit race? It started, by the way. It has started.
It has started. We're going right in with the big one. Yeah. I don't, Greg. Actually, I don't know where that is. And unrelated to whatever stories you might have heard, Brian, for a long time now, one of the things that I think about the most when I go to it's been a long time since I've been to a new racetrack. Just I've been doing it for a while now. One of the things that I spend the most time on is how do I get to grid from my paddock spot?
Yeah.
And how do I get off the damn track once I get out there? That's definitely a thing for me. I try to learning the track is here nor there. I'll watch a couple videos. We'll go out there and do a session. Who cares? How do I get to grid? How do I get there? Which way do I go for this?
Yeah, they don't put that on their YouTube videos typically.
They don't. You just gotta figure it out.
This comes from a guy named Justin Deffenbaugh.
Sure. Yeah.
He says, tell us your favorite driver's school story and how you learned about the last turn at Summit Point.
Yeah. Brian, are you familiar with what happens when curbs get wet? Do you know about that?
I do. We talk
Highly
about it
guarded
all the
racing
time on the
secret.
Super Tour broadcasts.
Highly guarded racing secret, I know.
Mm.
I got to the end of my driver's school and I had survived the whole thing. I kept the car in one piece through the entire situation. And the last or close to last race, they did 3 practice starts before the final sort of start for the actual race.
Yep.
They had taken the performance for the whole week and inverted the field. And so I started way at the back. And through those 3 starts, I worked my way all the way to the front. And I was just driving my butt off. I was having the best time. And it was in the rain. And I was having the best time. And on the final start, I got through the last, there were a couple of really high achieving Miatas and a Neon, and ITA, maybe? Neon. And I got with them, and then we worked together. We kind of squabbled a bit, and I got through them, and I broke away to lead the race. And I was like, the greatest day of my life. I cannot believe everything is going so well for me right now.
And
come around to the end of the race. I'm at Summit Point. I'm on the last corner thinking I cannot believe I'm going to win that. This is the best thing that will ever happen to me. I don't know, it was probably a 215 or a 195 section tire. And I put just the slightest little bit of that on the painted curb. The paint was off the curb and on the flat surface of the track just a little bit, and I got just enough to step the back end out. Then it went this way, and then it went this way, back again, and then I took off into the gravel trap. And I remember I was kind of craning my neck with the Hans, looking out the passenger side window, and the car lifted up until it got too heavy, and it would slam back down again as I'm sliding sideways through the gravel pit. And I got to sit there and watch everybody take the checker flag as I sat there and waited in the car.
You're a good sport for sharing the stories.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Let's see. Ed Murray says this Blair guy looks suspicious.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
No.
Paul Spencer wants to know what your 2025 racing schedule looks like.
My 2025 racing schedule. I'm going to try to go back to the runoffs.
Okay.
The last couple of years at VIR, I was lucky enough to go to the runoffs and make it to the runoffs. Not terribly happy with the way my 23 runoffs or 20. Wow, was that last year? It was. Oof. Wow. Not real happy with the way my 23 runoffs finished.
Yeah.
I worked my way in the top 10 and a whole lot of racing stuff happened and I was removed from the track with a car that no longer worked. And so my goal is I want to go back to the runoffs. And so I'm going to hit a couple of Super Tours on the way. I'll hit Road Atlanta, VIR, the CMP majors, a couple of regionals here and there, and hopefully we'll get back to the runoffs.
Someone asked when you were referring to the potential of a CSP car, you were talking about Club Spec Pulsar, right?
Yes. There are so many Pulsars out there. They need to be put back to work. We got to get those cars out of the woods and onto the track for sure. That'll be a good class.
Oh, apparently only if it's a Sportback, right?
Yeah, you're right. The more plentiful ones. Yeah, the Pulsar Sportback. That's what we need.
Another Deffenbaugh asks, what was your most memorable mistake in your driving career and how did you grow from it?
They're really getting into that, aren't they?
I know.
They're really leaning on that whole thing.
I'm going to have to start sending out notes to the family members of all my guests because this is awesome.
The biggest mistake. Oh my gosh, I just realized what they are talking about. Well, another highly guarded road racing secret actually is you gotta keep gas in the car.
Oh, I got one for you. Okay, go ahead. Yep.
I don't know if that's well known or not, but you gotta keep gas in the car. Probably the most pain I've ever felt, aside from, well, whatever. One of the most painful racing days I've ever had was in the rain at CMP at a majors event last year, I think it was. I managed to get a decent lead going. Car felt super hooked up and it was really going well. And so I managed to gap the field, and I equalized times. I'm trying to be smart about the way I was driving and keep it together. And then 2-3 laps before the end, my little gas light came on, and I went, "Hey, that's fine. That's cool.
Yep.
I know my car knows what's going on." And I come around to the penultimate lap, and car said, "No, we're not doing this. We're out. We're done." And so I pulled over and lost a win that day. I'm told, I don't want to believe them, but I'm told that I would have won the divisional
Oh boy.
divisional. Do I mean that? Yeah, divisional championship had I won that race. But I'm ignoring that, aggressively ignoring that.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I wrecked in a driver's school.
Okay.
I've also been involved with an incident where the gas wasn't put in the car. And I also put 6 quarts of Redline expensive motor oil through a car that didn't have the plug at the bottom in. So we've all done stuff.
We've all learned our lessons in one way or another.
I've got one more Blair question before I wrap this up with one more actual Club Spec question. And I don't know if it's fair to not tell you who's asking this question, but I'm not going to tell you who's asking this question.
Okay.
Before, oh gosh, there's so many good ones that are coming up here.
We can listen. I'm here. I'm standing. We're doing
it. Someone asks, what has been Blair's biggest asset to his racing career?
Is this the one that you're not sure if it's fair to tell me who?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. I'm
gonna say my wife has been the best thing possible for me because.
And what's her name?
Her name is Laura.
Okay.
Deffenbaugh.
You win, by the way. You
yes,
can sleep. You can sleep in your bed tonight.
I can't do a lot of math, but I can do that.
You don't have to buy any flowers tomorrow. There's no extra diamond rings that need to be purchased and put under the tree this Christmas season. You win today's perfectly. There were no questions that you right or wrong answers, but this was the one right or wrong answer.
That was the one.
And you got it. That's so good. That is so good. Sam Doherty, you passed the test. I love it.
Passed the test. Perfect.
Let's see.
I also don't pass a lot of tests.
So the question I was going to ask you, back to a Club Spec question. This is also from Carlos Morales. Do we anticipate the SCCA Solo Accelerating Making Club Spec Series a jacket class? Which I believe the behind the scenes of that, it wasn't an actual national championship class this past year.
The JK Chagrin, no, it was not.
And so a jacket class is an actual SCCA national championship class for solo nats. Is that in the offing? Do you know the answer to that question?
I do not know the answer to that question. I really don't. I genuinely don't know if that's part of the discussion. The problem with that is, excuse me, being a jacket class kind of changes the vibe of what we're doing with the class. And how the class grows and acts on its own. And so it's a good question, but it is a big question because of the implications. That's why we're with race, just as a quick example, with race experience, we're not worrying about classes. We're not worrying about any of that stuff to keep the pressure low and to keep the vibes high. And that would be a big change for Club Spec.
Yeah.
Not sure.
Okay, so you might not have to buy your wife flowers, but you might need to buy mom flowers because I think she thought maybe you should have answered that she was your best asset, or she wants credit for making sure you knew the right answer to that question. So either way, Mom, you did good.
Sure.
He definitely knows that you were part of the process to get there, and because you're such a good mom, he knew the right answer. So you get some credit for that as well.
For her, we're spending a lot of time hauling cars out of the woods for her, so that she's not bothered by that. That's what we're doing.
I love it.
Make sure that's good.
I love it. Let's see. Is there anything else here? Either. How many pizza signs do you have now?
I just have one.
Okay.
Brian, I just have one. I need. I had anticipated having more, but I just have one. I hope that makes a comeback. I'm trying to sort that out.
I love it. I think we're pretty much. What's your socials? Someone's asking how do you follow you on socials?
I am the.daily.racer on Instagram and on YouTube. You can find me on those two apps doing the most. I like my shtick is a heavy flavor of if I can do it, you can do it.
I love
I don't
that.
have a particularly large shop or expensive budget or so that's the vibe on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think we've pretty much roasted you. This was the roast that you did not know was coming.
I didn't know this was what this is about. This was really something.
I think we did.
I need to know though how many as a ratio. How many questions did you have to ignore because that's not what this isn't that kind of show.
Yeah, I don't think I really skipped over any for that purpose.
Got 'em all.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there was a lot of more trolling I could have done, and I tried to keep the show under an hour.
Of course.
And we've already gone past that. If someone wants to do a Let's Troll Blair for a full episode, let me know. Send me more questions.
Sure.
Send me
I'm
more.
sure there'll be a line for that one.
We could get you on. We're definitely going to have you on again.
Yeah, this was fun.
This has been a lot of fun.
This is a great time.
Thanks a lot. Do you have some folks? This is the part of the show where I let people thank the people who are helping them in their career and all that kind of stuff. If you've got sponsors on the car, here's the time to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my wife puts up with a lot. She sleeps in a van everywhere we go, which is a pretty big deal.
At the racetrack. I thought you keep her sleeping in a van at home. I'm like, wow, you need to do a lot more than buy diamonds if you make her sleep in a van.
That was the case on that one. To my mom's credit, this has been a family thing for us.
Oh yeah.
Entire life. My brother and I both grew up at the track. We always all went to the track, so it's been a family thing for all of us for sure. I would not have gotten where I was last year. I wouldn't have this display that I'm super stoked on if it wasn't for Racing for ALS. This is a group doing some really special things for ALS patients and their families. You can go to racingforals.com to learn about what they're doing. It's really magical. They have a series of things that they do, from placing money for hospital bills directly to patients' pockets, to lending wheelchair vans to their families to make it easier to get to and from doctors' appointments. It's a really special thing they're doing. And along with that, my buddy Rob at Fastest Skunk Racing, who I've lent the car to, has also been a tremendous help to me in the last 2 or 3 years or so. So without people like that, none of this would be happening the way it is.
Yeah. We've had Ryan Cheek on, and she is a big Racing for ALS person as well. It's a great organization, and we always enjoy. I wish we didn't have to feature organizations like that.
Ultimately, you want to, right?
So enjoy is the wrong term, but I Parkinson's was what we had to deal with my father-in-law. So I have a real affinity for people who do things to help that organization and all of those. ALS is another one, and I wish that we wouldn't have to do that, but those who use their platforms to help organizations like that is something I really try to highlight on the show. So I love having the opportunity to be able to do that. So
yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Blair, thank you.
Thanks, Brian. This was really fun. I enjoyed this.
We will we'll definitely do it again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait.
All right, that's going to do it for another episode of Inside the SCCA. If you like what you saw, or actually Inside the SCCA, presented by RaceSchool.com. If you like what you saw and what you heard, subscribe to the RacingWire Podcast Network so you won't miss any episodes. It would be also great if you share a comment, especially if it's a good one. If it's a bad one, put it right on Blair Deffenbaugh's page.
Yeah, right. Drop it right there.
Exactly. You can follow us on social media to find out who our next guest is. Leave a question. We're on Facebook. On Twitter, it's @RaceAnnouncer. There's a new Inside the SCCA every week. I'm Brian Bielanski. Have yourself a fantastic week. Stay safe and go play with cars.
I'm Abby Shear, and this is Inside the SCCA.